teaching you how to reposition, how to make a new start point, and what to do when your thread breaks, which all of these kind of work together. You have to know how to do all of them kind of sort of to do any of them, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's get started. The first thing I want to say is, the first thing I'm going to show you is, let's say that you have created an entire quilt and you were able to quilt an entire row, and then for some reason you had to shut everything down and you couldn't resume it until the next day. These are the things that I have as bullet points for you to do to make sure that you're successful with bringing it back up so that you can line everything back up and get started again. First of all, when you create a quilt, make sure that you save it before you even put one stitch into your quilt, okay? Oh, let me look at my notes. Hold on just a second. Told you I have brain fog. After you've saved it, take note of how many rows you completed. So I might have a little piece of paper out beside me and go, completed 3 of 5 rows, okay? So that you just remember. The third thing is do not advance your quilt after you finish that last row. Just leave it in your viewing, okay? And that's exactly what I've done over here. I quilted 1 row and I left it be, and then I shut everything down, okay? So I want to talk you through this before I show you, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull my quilt back up on my screen, okay? And of course, nothing's going to be lined up. So my crosshairs is going to be in one place on my screen and my quilt's going to be in another place, and it's just confusing because nothing lines up. I get it. So this is what we're going to do. There's 3 things that you have to line up. You have to line your physical quilt up with your needle, and then you've got to take that and line it up with your screen, okay? So we're going to make this easy. I was taught this when I went to training. KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. And when you say that to yourself, you're like, oh man, I feel really stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. I tell myself that all the time. Okay, so I do try to keep it simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to first physically take the needle of our machine and line it up on the start point of the row we have already quilted, because that is an easy reference point for just lining all of our layers back up. Okay, I'm going to repeat that one more time to help that sink in. So the first thing I'm going to do is find an easy reference point to line all my layers back up. And when I call them layers, I mean my quilt and my needle and my screen. Okay, those are my layers. So I'm going to take my needle of my machine and I am going to go put it at the start point of the row I finished quilting last and put my needle down in it, okay? That automatically lines my physical quilt up with my needle. The only thing left to do is to line my screen up with it, okay? I'm keeping it simple, aren't I? Okay, so once we have 2 out of the 3 lined up, we've got just the last thing to do. So once we have those 2 lined up, then you've got to turn a different switch on in your brain, and you've got to say, okay, the crosshair on my screen represents my needle. I am not going to move my crosshair. My crosshair is going to stay where it's at because I actually have my needle where I want it to be already, because I have it at the start point of my row. So I don't want my crosshair to move on my screen. I want my physical quilt pattern to move on my screen. So I'm going to take that quilt pattern and move it to my crosshair. This is where there's the disconnect. Everybody is always wanting to move their crosshair to their quilt pattern when it's the exact opposite of that, okay? So here we go. I'm going to take you now, okay, and I'm going to flip you around. Okay, so I'm going to turn my light on so that you can see a little bit better. Okay, so here's my row, okay, and I only quilted 1 because, of course, this is just scrap fabric and I try not to use too much, so I have plenty to show you something else another time. So I only quilted 1 row, okay? So here's the start point of that row. I am physically going to go and put my needle right there, And just for teaching purposes, I'm going to put my needle in the down position, okay, of the start point of that row, okay? So I've already done step 1. Line my needle up with my pattern, my quilt, okay, with the start point. That's going to be my reference point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring my quilt into my screen, and I saved it as Facebook Live, so I'm going to pull it in. There it is. Oh, holy smokes, of course it's going to do that. You know, I figured this trick out yesterday and didn't even dawn on me that I could have started this out like that. This always happens on a live. Do you look and see? I forgot that when you bring in a design, it will bring it in on your crosshair. So if you already have it all lined up, it's automatically going to be lined up for you. Man, that was a great teaching moment right there. It's automatically lined up for me if I line it up on my quilt before I even bring it in onto my screen. That is pretty awesome. Let me mess up so that that doesn't happen. I'm going to close this out. And I'm going to move my crosshair away. Let's do like it really does happen in real life. So I'm going to bring my quilt back in. There it is. Okay. Look, it brought it in on the crosshair again. But this time I don't have it at the crosshair. I'm going to move my machine to that start point. Okay. Because typically this is what we have to do because we don't realize how smart we are. And then I'm going to say, oh, my crosshair, I can't even see it. It's nowhere near my start point, but I want this start point to come and line up with that crosshair. That's what I want it to do, and it's not there yet. So to do that, you would go to Modify, and you would select Reposition, and you would come over here, and you would select Start Point. And when you do that, it takes your pattern, and it moves it directly to the start point of your pattern itself. Okay? So let's recap real quick, okay? Again, if you're really smart and you don't just accidentally teach yourself this on the spur of the moment, if you're really smart, before you even bring your pattern in to your frame, you'll go ahead and put your needle at the start point of your pattern, okay? So I've got my needle at the start point of my pattern, and if I go and pull up my pattern from yesterday, it'll automatically pull it in at my start point, and I have no more lining up to do because it's already lined up for me. And I can check that by coming down here, and I can move my needle to, let's just say, the point of this leaf right here, and I can look up on the screen and see it's on the point of that leaf right there. I can move it over to the point of this leaf right here and see that it's on the point of that leaf right there. So everything's lined up, okay? So that's the easy way of bringing it in. Let's say I didn't do it the easy way, and I'm just ready to begin my quilt. I've got my quilt right there. I've got my computer on. I pull my quilt in from yesterday. Okay, there's my quilt. I'm going to then take my needle and I'm going to move it to the start point of my row because this is how I'm going to line everything back up because it's the easiest way to do it. I've got my needle down at the start point of that row. So I'm going to come up here on my screen. There's where my crosshair is. I need my pattern now to move to my crosshair, and I want that green start point to go to my crosshair. So to do that, I'm going to go to Modify, Reposition, and I'm going to come over here and select Start Point. Do you know how hard this is to do if you're watching it through your phone and trying to do it at the same time? And then it moves it to my start point. And I'm going to just refresh my screen right there so you can see it. So I just showed you 2 different ways to restart your quilt and just line everything back up. Now, if you've got everything lined back up, how do you get it to begin the next row? Well, what I would do from here is I would simply go and advance my quilt top. So I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to go physically, and we've already done this class. We've already done a drag and drop. I'm going to physically go and advance my quilt. Okay. And then I'm going to come and find somewhere in the center of this pattern at the bottom of that first row. I'm going to find whoops, look what Kelley just did. I accidentally just moved my pattern and now everything is out of whack. What do I do? It's all out of position. Have you ever done this? Let me tell you, the reason why that just happened is not because there's something wrong with my tablet. It's because select was selected and I took my finger and moved my pattern, okay? I just messed up. Now, the easy thing to be would be for me just to select undo, but I'm going to pretend like I don't realize that I can do that. And I'm going to go and try to reposition my quilt back without unrolling it or anything, okay? So this one's a little bit more trickier. I could get really smart and come over here and look at my quilt and go, I can still reach the end point of that last row right there. Look at that. I can still reach that. So I could come up here on my computer screen, okay? There's where my crosshair is, and I really need this end point to go right there to that crosshair, okay? So what I could do from this point is go to Modify, Reposition, and I could come over here and select Endpoint. And when you do that, whoops, that didn't work. It went all the way down here to this endpoint. Do you know why it did that? It did that because that's the one with the green, that's the one with the red circle around it. It's not just a red dot, okay? So that means it would want to line itself up with the very bottom row, which is not where we wanted it to line up. We wanted it to line up with this. So what do you do when that happens? So what you do is you have to take this green, I keep saying green. You have to take this red circle and you've got to make it come up to this red dot up here. To do that, you have to go do a new end point. Or sometimes, when we broke our thread, it's going to be a new start point. Well, this time we're going to set a new end point. So I'm going to go to New Start and End, and I'm going to come over here to this column, okay? And you've got multiple different sets of arrows. I'm going to use the ones down here. The ones down here, it says it should say jump. The latest update forgot the J. They decided to use a different word and make it up. I don't know why. Okay. But what this does is it jumps from one endpoint to the next endpoint to the next endpoint to the next endpoint. Well, I need it to come up to this endpoint, so I'm going to hit this arrow up button, and you can watch that little red circle go all the way up until it gets to the one I actually want it to line up with, okay? So now I've got the red circle at the right end of the first row like I want it to, like where my needle really is right now, okay? So now I could go back to that Modify and Reposition, and I can come over here, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see. When I select Endpoint, you're going to see that my quilt pattern moves to my crosshair. My crosshair doesn't move to my red circle, okay, but the pattern moves. So watch this. You see how it jumped down there to my crosshair? Again, where the disconnect is for all of us, including myself, is that I always was thinking that I was moving my crosshair, when in reality, we're always moving our pattern to our crosshair, okay? So now I have everything lined up just the way I needed it to, okay? And if I wanted to go ahead and get that next row quilted, the only thing I have to do is get it to start on the second row. Right now, if I were to go to Pro Stitcher and quilt and run, it would not come to this second row to quilt. It would actually go up to the first row, and I would get a motor error because it would hit this bar, and I would be like, what's wrong with my machine? It didn't do what I told it to do. Well, actually, it did do what you told it to do, because the only start point it knows to go to is this one right now, okay? So we need to tell it to move that green circle to the second row, okay? So we're going to go to Pro Stitcher and New Start and End, and we're going to come over here again to the Start and End column, and we're going to come down here to the Jump, and we're going to select the one arrow going down. And when we do that, oh my goodness, what happened? It moved a green circle and a red circle and put them on top of each other. I wonder why that happened. I bet you've had that happen to you before also. I can tell you why that happened, okay? You can never move a green circle start point ahead of a red circle stop point. It doesn't make sense in its mind because it's like, I can't start quilting past a place you've already told me to stop at. And in its mind, these are the only two places is where the circles are, okay? So what I need to do is I actually need to go ahead and move that stop point all the way back to the end of the pattern again, okay? I hope y'all are all following me. So I'm going to come back up here to this new start and end because I don't want to start and end point on top of each other. My machine will just start the tack off and then it'll end with a tack off and it won't sew anything for me if I were to do nothing right now, okay? So I'm going to come over here to the end points and start points and I'm going to use that jump feature again, trying to do it where y'all can see it all in the viewing, and I'm going to move that jump point all the way down to that last stop point right there, okay? Now that I've done that, now it's happy being right there by itself. But it wasn't beforehand because that red circle was way up here, which was before I had put that. Okay, so now it's ready to go to that second row and quilt for me. Now my run button is grayed out. The reason why my run button right now is grayed out is because I am not under the quilt option right now. So I need to go to the quilt option. And once I go to the quilt option, my run button is now green, okay? Now that my run button is green, I'm going to select run and proceed, and I'm going to let it start that second row real quick for us. I'm trying to do this one-handed, y'all, I'm sorry. I'm going to let it sew for just a second. And I'm going to pause it. We're going to pretend as if my thread has broke right here, okay? So anytime you have a thread break, you're going to pause your machine. You're not going to hit emergency stop. You will always pause it. Once you've paused it, you will then hit the cancel button. That way you can move your machine, okay? So I'm going to move my machine over to the side, and I'm just going to snip those threads so that it does break my thread, okay? Okay, thread broke. There we go. So my thread broke right here. On my screen, I can see how much of my pattern it quilted, okay? So it kind of helps me know about where I need to put my needle to start it back up at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle. I probably shouldn't have my glide foot on because it's not making it as easy for y'all to see. But I always put my machine needle a little bit before the thread broke. So you can see that I have a few stitches. Let's see if I can get it from this angle. No, not a good angle. Okay, you can see that there's a few stitches right here before my thread broke. I'm going about 10 stitches behind that, and I'm placing my needle behind that, okay? Because I want to make sure that it's locked into place. It's got good, it's not going to come out when it gets through. Even though it's going to lock my stitches in place because I have it set to do tie-offs, I always like to have a little bit more security than that, okay? So my thread has broke. I put my needle where I want it to start back sewing again. I'm going to come up to my screen and I'm going to go to Pro Stitcher. I'm going to go to New Start and End. And I'm going to come over here to the Start column and I'm going to select Auto twice. Now I want to explain to you why you have to select Auto twice, okay? The first time I select Auto, what it does is it takes that green start circle and it connects it to your crosshair. Now if I were to move my crosshair, it moves with my crosshair. You see that? Okay, so what it's saying is, hey, I'm connecting myself to you and I'm going to move wherever you want me to move. And until you tell me to stay still, I'm just going to keep moving with you. So to get it to stay still and stay in place, you come over here and you select Auto one last time. Okay, and when you do that, it now will not move with my crosshair and it stays put. It plants itself. Okay, so now all I would simply do is go to Quilt and select Run and Proceed, and it's going to go to where I told it to start quilting at. Sorry, this is very hard doing one-handed, y'all. and it's going to start back quilting for me. And my thread just came undone, and I'm going to tell you why. I have a completely full brand new bobbin in here, one of those Wonder Fills, and it's a little overfilled. So it just came unwound from my bobbin underneath. But that's how you get a new start when you have a thread break, okay? That's going to bother me really bad, y'all. See how it came out completely? So not part of the lesson today, but it came out and it wound around. Are y'all seeing this? It wound around the spindle inside my, oh, look at all that lint. Oh, that's a lot of lint. It's even stuck inside of there. Look at that, y'all. Look at all that lint. Okay. I'm gonna just, this is what I do when this happens, just showing y'all real quick. So I'm gonna go ahead and thread it back through, and then this is what I do. I go and I take a bunch of thread off of it, because they do sometimes wind these with too much thread on them. And once I've done that, then I put it back in my machine. Okay, I'm hooked to my phone with a microphone because I was worried about y'all being able to hear me today. So I gotta take you with me. Okay, so I just wanted to show y'all that, since, you know, it was a great teaching experience, right? Y'all seeing something bad happen to me while I'm teaching? Okay, so now hopefully our bobbin's okay, and I had a true thread break, so why not teach you a thread break one more time, right? So again, what I'm gonna do, my thread broke right here, true thread break. I'm gonna move my needle right before that thread break. I'm gonna come up here to my screen, and I'm going to go to Pro Stitcher, New Start and End. Come over here to the Start column, select Auto once. It attaches its green circle to my crosshair. If I were to move my crosshair, it moves with it. I'm going to put it exactly where I want it to start at. And then I'm going to select the Auto button one more time, which plants that green start point in place. Okay? So now the only thing I have left to do is to make sure I have quilt green. Come down here to run, select run, and proceed. Be ready to bring that bobbin thread up to the top like this. Very nice and neatly, I like to hold these two threads tight like this. See, I'm holding them where they have a little bit of tightness, but I'm not like doing it so tight that I'll have a hard time making that first stitch. And then I'm going to select resume. Typically, I pause my machine, and then that's when I snip these extra threads just so they don't get in the way. Okay? Okay, so let me turn this back around to me. Oh, I just see that my husband jumped on here. Get off, Brian. We don't need you visiting today. Okay, so I taught you how to reposition your quilt once you start back up. I taught you how to recover from a thread break. Does anybody else have anything that they need to show that I didn't answer today about either one of those topics? Because if you do, speak now or forever hold your peace. How many stitches do you have for the tie-offs? I don't know. Let me see. Right now, for tie-offs for me, I have mine set at 8 tie-offs at 0.01 distance. Because I'm excessive. That's why. Okay. Any other questions? Did I confuse you completely, or did I help you today with learning how to reposition your quilt? Does it make sense that you're always moving your pattern and not your crosshair? I hope so. The easy thing to do is to always find an easy reference point to line everything back up with. Okay. Well, I'm going to wait just a second longer to see if there are any other questions. And I didn't look to see if there were questions beforehand. Let me scroll up through real quick. Don't you need to move the endpoint again? Yes, Pat, I did. I did that on purpose to see if y'all, I was trying to have as many screw ups as I could to simulate the things that I've had to do this week with people over the phone. So, but I hope I helped y'all. Makes more sense now to me. Good. Okay. Well, if y'all have any questions, remember my email is kmckenzie@janome-america.com. I hope everyone has a great week. Next week, Jeannie will be doing the live. I'm not going to spoil it for her, but it's going to be very exciting what she's going to be doing. Next week, I also am doing that Pro Stitcher 2-hour class. It's actually Tuesday. I thought I was doing it Thursday, but I'm doing it Tuesday from 10 to 12 Eastern Time next week. So if you need a good, thorough Pro Stitcher class, make sure you register for it. I posted the registration this morning on the Facebook page. So again, if you need Pro Stitcher training, look at the post from earlier this morning and you can register for that class. It is Tuesday from 10 to 12 Eastern Time next week. Linda, when do you use drag and drop? I use drag and drop when I'm going to advance my rows. And we did a video on that just a few weeks ago. It's in the Guides 29 section. I did a whole class on that. Is it the same one you did a week ago? Yes, Pat, it is. It's the same exact class. So if you've already taken it and you have conquered it and you don't need a refresher, then don't sign up for it. But if you want a refresher, you're more than welcome to. Okay. Any other questions? If there's no other questions, thank y'all so much for joining us, and we will see y'all next week for another live. Thank you.